Have you ever heard the expression, timing is everything? This car appreciates that old saying.
Alright guys, it's time to start a new project. Today we're introducing what you see next to me here, which is a 1959 Volvo PV544. If you guys don't know, on my father's side we are of Swedish descent, and because of that I have always wanted to do a Swedish car like this one. So let's start off with what the goals of this car are. As you guys have been seeing in some of our recent videos, we have had transmission failure after transmission failure, and frankly, it's getting pretty old. I think the core of the problem is we are making more power than we've really ever made before. And because of that, we need to step up our transmission game. We're going to continue to do that in some of our other projects, but for the immediate future, I want to have a little bit of success and not have to worry about breaking stuff so much. So let me tell you a little bit about the story on how we found this car. Once we got back from the No Name Nationals, we kind of caught up on a few chores that we may have been putting off, and one of them was pulling a Vortec 4200 out of a Trailblazer that I had planned to junk. So we pulled the engine, loaded up the Trailblazer to be scrapped, and when we went to the scrapyard, I noticed that there was this little car sitting there. From a distance, I thought it was like a 40 Ford or something like that, but as we got closer, it was very clear that it definitely was not. As soon as I saw the front frame rails on the car, I knew it was something kind of special. Dad immediately identified it as a Volvo 444. Turns out it's a Volvo PV544, which is basically the same car, but he was on the right track. We left the junkyard that day, and I couldn't stop thinking about this thing for some reason. My dad remarked, "Oh, those things, they're extremely light." And that's when it hit me like a kick in the head. Don't beat the horse, unload the wagon. Why do we keep trying to run these super heavy cars with all this horsepower that we have to make in order to meet our ET goals, and build something that's extremely light and doesn't require near as much horsepower and takes all of the stress off your engine, transmission, and rear end? If you guys aren't aware, I am not the shortest guy. I'm like 6'2" roughly, but I'm mostly legs. And because of that, finding a car that I fit comfortably in is a little bit difficult. And when I saw this car, I was like, yeah, I can fit in that. And when I looked up the curb weight, this thing only weighs 2,072 pounds with all the junk in it. This made my mind go nuts. Why does everybody start with such heavy cars? Camaros are over 3,000 pounds. Even the ultralight Fox body Mustangs are rather heavy from the start. What if you started with something that already weighed right around 2,000 pounds and lighten it up from there? Most people are aware that unibody cars are lighter than body-on-frame cars, and this is a car that was built with the construction style of the 30s and 40s, i.e. very light, but it is not a body-on-frame. Because of this, the car is extremely light, and once we start throwing fiberglass parts at it, it's gonna be even lighter. So, all that to say, I want to build this car for Sick Week 2023, and I want to compete in the Sick Week Freaks class, and the goal is going to be to make this car as light as possible. Within reason, of course. There's a few creature comforts that I'd like to keep, but if we could get this thing anywhere near 2,200 to 2,300 pounds with driver, that would be insane. What I found to be so neat when researching this car is even lighter than the famous Henry J, which is very popular in gasser and lots of other classes because it is such a light car to start with. Those cars are so light, they don't even have trunks. And the Henry J is 200 pounds more than this car. To put that into perspective, going the speeds that I would like to go with this car, going from a 2,200 pound car to a 2,400 pound car, 200 pounds of weight, you would have to make 77 more horsepower in order to accomplish that. So going the other way, losing 200 pounds is like gaining 77 horsepower. Now, before everybody goes wild and goes off and starts buying all the Volvos in the country, let me explain some of the shortcomings of running a car of this era. Running a car like this is going to require quite a bit of strengthening of the chassis. Frankly, these things were not designed to have much more than 100 horsepower, let alone approaching 1,000. Therefore, a lot of the components in this car are going to have to be significantly reinforced and improved so that it can hold the horsepower and torque. This is a unibody car, and similar to like a Fox body Mustang, the unibody does not go the entire length of the car. Therefore, we're going to have to add some subframe connectors, but we were going to have to do that anyways to put the cage in that I would like to put in this car. While this is a deficit of the build, you're actually adding that weight to no matter what car you start with. So it kind of actually comes out to be a benefit on this car. Next, we need to talk about aerodynamics. Back in the 40s, they didn't really have the types of tools that we have today. All of the complex modeling and computerization that we have access today that allows us to model the shapes of cars and really optimize the aerodynamics simply didn't exist. Because of that, this car is going to have a fair amount of drag. That being said, you're going to notice that this windshield angle is actually laid back pretty far for a car of this era. Because of that, this car has a 0.5 coefficient of drag, but it does have a rather large frontal area, 2 square meters. So it's still going to have to move around a lot of air. To put it into perspective, take a typical Fox body Mustang, and at 150 miles per hour, this car will take 100 more horsepower to move it through the air. But that's not really a huge deal. You're only going to have to deal with that when you're going 150 miles per hour. Most of your ET is in the front half of the track, so while we may not see the same mile per hour out of something like this, because it will be so much lighter, it will likely cover the quarter mile in a quicker time. Also, with the aerodynamics, you'll notice that the slope of the roof is pretty severe. This is actually kind of a big problem. While technically the car is moving through the air, motion is relative, so you can think of the air as moving over top of the car relative to the car. Now, air doesn't really like to change directions. When you're dealing with aerodynamics, you need to be very gradual and kind of suggest the air to go the way that you want it to. And the faster that you go, the worse something like this will get. Because of this taper in the back, it will result in the air going sort of this direction, and there will be a low pressure area sort of in this region, and it will result in lots of tail lift to the car. Because of this, at high speeds, this car will get very unstable. Since the class that we plan to participate in does not prohibit the use of a tail wing, we are going to install some sort of tail wing on this car, whether it's a wing up here or it's a wing extruding out the back here. This will generate downforce, which will counteract the lifting force, and hopefully make this car very stable at high speeds without producing too much additional drag. When I saw this car in the junkyard, I noticed that it had this sort of contour in the front. And I knew, once I saw that, they were thinking about passenger comfort. As I mentioned earlier, I am on the taller side, so I like a little bit of legroom. And this car should provide me plenty of legroom, which should make the street drives a whole lot easier. Alright guys, that's all we have time for today. I hope you are as excited about this project as I am. And to give you a little hint as to how we plan to power the car, take a look at my shirt. With that, we're going to end the video off there. If you want to support us further, consider buying a t-shirt like you see that I am wearing today. Like, comment, subscribe, consider becoming a channel member by hitting the join button down below. And look forward to future episodes on this 59 Volvo PV544. See you in the next one, guys.